Welcome to NocBro Nation.
Welcome back, guys. Jarrell here.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're here to bring you Scott Gimple Entertainment Weekly Interview Part 3. In Part 3 of our sit-down with Scott Gimple, we talked about continuing the program without its main star and asked if he knows when and how the series will end. Gimple also shot down one theory about the next big beat in the story and if the impending arrival of the Commonwealth is linked to the three-ring CRM helicopter group that whisked Rick Grimes away.
That is actually really cool. There's some really cool stuff in here. So we can't wait to bring you guys our thoughts and theories on this. So if you've already checked this information out, just watch us and just get our kind of feel of what Gimple said, because there's some really good information in this 4-part series of this interview. So glad that Entertainment Weekly did this, because we'll leave the full link in some of the varied topics that he talked about. We just kind of pulled out some stuff that looked very interesting that we wanted to talk about, but he did give some really good points on some
absolutely.
of the stuff. So, all right, who's going to start?
I'll start.
All
right. So Entertainment Weekly asks, I've asked you this question before, but I haven't asked you this question in a while, and certainly not since Robert Kirkman put an end to the comic book. Keeping that in mind, with him ending that story, do you have any sort of timetable yet in terms of how long you all want this show and story to go on? So that's really interesting. For those of you that do not know, the source material comic book ended at issue 193. As I look over to you, quite 6 months ago. It's been over a year.
It's been a year.
Yeah, it's been
a year.
Wow,
it's crazy.
All right, so here's Scott Gimple. We're always in contact with AMC to ensure we're on the same page about moving on. There isn't a timetable. We're continuing on. People are digging the show, and there's a lot more story to tell. I've said it. Angela's said it too. That last issue of the comic reads like a pilot, and that's interesting. I love that answer. There's a ton more story to tell. As long as the audience wants it, we would love to tell it. So far, we're very much on the same page.
And I mean, yes, they can still tell a lot of stories. I mean, we're looking at the source material of what's left, coming up after the Whisperer War to the Commonwealth storyline. In a way, from the source material, there isn't a lot of story left, but they can put their minds together. And I think we had a commenter ask not too long ago, do you think that once they get done with the Commonwealth story, if they're going to continue basically creating canon stories and just going on and telling stories?
I would absolutely love that. And he mentions the final comic reads like a pilot, and it does, because if you were to read issue 192 of the source material, the issue before the final issue, and then read the final issue has no connection at all with the storylines that were happening in 192.
It jumps ahead 15 years, roughly.
I think more than that.
Maybe
almost.
20, yeah.
It jumps ahead many years, so many years that you've got all that meat, all that story there that could be told. And like Jarrell was saying, they could add some canon in there and lead up to
just be all canon.
The final issue.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, they could take little pieces out of it, and once they get to like the 20 years and everybody's older, they can take kind of pieces from the source material, switch them around, of course, due to characters. Yeah. But yeah,
you could even take that last issue and create stories off of that last issue.
Oh,
that's how good that issue was.
Yeah.
It left so many questions.
It did. Yeah.
So we did a video on it.
Yeah, they could definitely do it, guys. So, Entertainment Weekly asks, I remember talking to Robert years ago about the comic where he said, I don't know when it's going to end, but I know how it ends. Yeah. Do you have in your head a vision for how this show will eventually end? Gimple says, I've had visions, and I think you always have to have a small variety of ways it could go, because there are so many different things that can happen outside the narrative production-wise. There's so much that happens within the narrative that catches fire, or a story that is shorter or longer than you anticipated. I've always had a few different aspects in mind that serve a greater theme. As far as ending the show, though, whenever it might be, I would be talking about it with Angela and really try to fulfill the whole of it. I think with Andy's departure, we tried to sort of fulfill the whole of Rick's story on the show, and we had planned that for a good while. It'll be the same whenever, if ever, the show ends. Maybe we simply don't have to deal with it because the show goes on and on and on.
Nice.
Well, I mean,
there wasn't much there.
Not much. I mean, he's
basically saying, look, we always have to think about a way to end the show.
Oh yeah, any TV show has to.
Yeah.
I mean, every show has an end. You would love to continue to go, but we don't know the business side of it. You know what they're looking at. They're looking at ratings, money. You know, do people want to leave? Like Denai Guerrera. You know, we know that Norman Reedus said he'll never leave, but you know, we'll see.
Yeah. All right, Entertainment Weekly. You mentioned ending Rick's story. How nervous or worried were you that the show wouldn't be accepted without him? Were you concerned about that? You know, this is Scott Gimple. You know, there were people who were concerned about that, who were making me concerned about that, but I don't want to imply that I was certain how it would go. For this, I just felt I was more worried about the way that Rick was leaving. I was hoping that the audiences would be intrigued and want to see what all that was about, which I feel is basically what happened. I was pretty nervous about that, but I feel that Rick is a gigantic part of this show, and he has a gigantic story. And that story could be told in a number of different ways. As long as we kept telling Rick's story, we were doing right by the audience. It could be in any medium. Maybe not any medium, but it could be in the movies, and hopefully people would be happy with that. I felt the show had so much to offer, even with losing someone as huge as that. And they would dig it. He goes on to say, I know that I was still interested in watching it. I was sure that we would tell that story, and I was hoping that the audience would appreciate that. I was also, in all the things I talked about with Angela, so excited to see them execute that. I just felt the audience would feel the same way. Angela has done such a marvelous job in executing it.
Which is true.
She has.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine what the writers had to go through knowing that Andrew Lincoln was leaving. And even Robert Kirkman has said about this, the source material. I mean, when we first started reading it, yeah, this is a story about Rick Grimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, to Robert Kirkman, no, it's not. You know, I mean, in a way it was about a man, but not necessarily Robert Kirkman, or not Rick Grimes. It wasn't his full story. Like, it wasn't all about Rick Grimes, in a sense. It was about him, but it was about everything else around him. Family, survival, doing whatever you can for your kids.
Yes, but Rick Grimes played the most important role in telling that story. So, yeah. I mean, obviously he was a big part of it. And I think if you were any executive and the main character, especially in this story, left, I think no matter what, you would be nervous. Mm-hmm. And to hear that he's saying, yeah, I was nervous, but, you know, we talked about it. And I think, you know, that people wanted to hear the story. And I think, in my opinion, Rick leaving probably was one of the best things for the show. You think?
No.
Here's why. Hear me out. For me, it left me like, I have to know more. Like, I have to know what's going to happen with Rick. And
well, knowing that he's alive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's what I meant. Right. Like the story, there's an element of the story that is now, you know, it's a surprise for us. We don't know. And that's what kind of keeps me going in hope that they clear that up.
Right. But just not seeing him in the main show again kind of sucks.
It always sucks.
Knowing the stories that he's missing from being, where we are now. But
it always sucks. And there's always going to be a place there for Rick Grimes that we're going to miss in the show.
Yeah. So Entertainment asks, but that had to be a bit scary to continue The Walking Dead after losing the face on the center of every Walking Dead poster. Gimple says, I wasn't concentrating on the scary part. Other people were trying to get me to concentrate on the scary part, but we were doing it. It was happening. There were so many factors that we were like, oh well, Andy had to do what he had to do, and we had to make it work. I'm really happy with the way that we did that. It allows us to tell an entirely different Walking Dead story with the star of The Walking Dead. Definitely true.
To be honest, guys, it also didn't hurt that really Rick Grimes didn't play a big role in the Whisper War. And even in the Whisper story arc. I mean, he really didn't, other than the fact of creating the military that you and I have talked about, that iconic scene.
And iconic scenes with him and Negan, things like that.
Yeah, little parts though, right? I mean, there wasn't
little pieces of it. It was just a war going on. So.
Yeah.
All right, so the continuation of this question is from EW. It's obviously such a huge departure from the comic, but in what you just said too, it felt very comic book like in terms of Walking Dead, where has these hard resets every once in a while where you're like, wait, what? What's going on? Who are these people? Meaning CRM and other people. So Gimple says, I think you're exactly right. I think that was the biggest reset, obviously, in the history of the show, and it was right around the time that the comic had the biggest reset in the history of the comic. That is the number one thing with The Walking Dead that I wanted to do, was even if we're not serving the exact story from the comic, we're serving that feeling that story gave you, because that stuff in my mind was unaccessible. As long as we could generate those feelings, I felt we were going in the right direction. Episodes 905 to 906, I think, really generated that feeling. Yeah, I mean, it's a big departure, a big reset from the stories that they're doing in the comics, or I'm sorry, taking the stories from the source material to the show, Rick leaving the show. Oh God, now the rest of his stories are gone.
Yeah, like,
so what do we do?
I actually commend that whole production team for having to do that. That's huge. And I think they handled it really well.
They've divvied out some little things to other characters.
Aaron.
But, Aaron. Yeah. Losing the hand. No, but, it's just something that you have to do. And I think Angela's done really well. I mean,
they easily could have said, okay, guys, our main character's going, let's end this show after the Whisperer War, after the Whisperer arc. Mm-hmm. They could have easily done that. Sure. And they had every excuse to do that. Mm-hmm. But they chose not to. And they forged ahead. And I think that we're getting probably some of the best Walking Dead that we've seen in a while.
Could you imagine if they ended the show with, like, the woman on the radio? And then you're always wondering, like, who was that? Who did they reach out to?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just over.
Yeah.
us knowing in the source material know what it is, but if they ended it there without going to, like, season 11, people would probably be pissed. Like, what?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's cool.
All right.
Good.
So
this is the last question of this part, and it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, here we go. As we look ahead on the show, obviously the next sort of big beat is the introduction of the Commonwealth. Getting back to the 3 rings and the CRM that we were talking about on Worlds Beyond, is the Commonwealth intertwined with that at all? Because obviously there's a lot of speculation that it might be. But then you were saying earlier that the 3-ring helicopter group was not taking over every show. What can you say about that? Scott Gimple. The Commonwealth is its own thing. There are a lot of changes to the comic story and the show, but it's important to me and to Angela to tell the story from the comic. There might be some weird minor ways that it touches, if at all, but it's a version of the story from the comic.
Fantastic. I think it's great. Now, I know a lot of you, we know a lot of you guys who have commented, are comic book readers. You know the Commonwealth story. It wasn't a great story arc. It wasn't towards the end of the comic ending, but it was not a great story arc. But we've gotten hints of it. As you guys know, the woman from the radio is dealing into the Commonwealth.
Yep.
The character who's going to be coming in season 10 called the Princess, she's from the Commonwealth. Now they're reaching for a character way out in the source material, bringing her into the Whisperer War. And we even thought very early.
Way too early.
Very early. Yeah. But I think where the show is going, season 11 is going to be getting to that Commonwealth story arc.
Not to go into too much detail, real quick, the Commonwealth, and this is a question that I want to ask you. The Commonwealth is a community in the source material that is governed in a way where they have a higher society and a lower society. Mm-hmm. If you worked as a lawyer in the previous life, you were a lawyer in the Commonwealth, and you were considered high class.
Yep.
Lower class were not treated well.
No.
Here's my question to you. Would you like to see that part of the story kind of flushed? Like, do you want to see that represented in the show?
If they're going off the source material, then yes, because you could then see our survivors seeing a big community. Now, in the source material, this community is massive. You could see how they're living and how they're being ruled, in a sense. To where then people would be like, okay, why are they putting up with this? You know? But then it's like, would they really want to do anything about it?
Yeah.
It depends on how they tell it.
Yeah, like, me personally, I felt that the source material of the comic book really lacked the storytelling when it came to that part of the Commonwealth.
They didn't dive into it much.
Yeah, they didn't give me enough fuel to say, hey, that community is absolutely wrong in doing what they're doing. Like, there just wasn't enough there. It didn't really translate to the reader that way.
Not a lot of backstory.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just, I think for the show they could do it to where, and of course how it depends on how long they take with it, but to see a community that you think, oh, has all these people and they're seeing all this lavish lifestyle, but to then dig underneath of it to find out there's high class, there's middle class, there's low class, and these people aren't treated very well.
Yeah.
Who would take offense to that? You know, I think Maggie would take offense. A lot of people would, but what our will they tell the story to where our characters would do something about it, to where if there's going to be a clash between them after they just got done with probably a brutal war, are we going to have another war? I mean, there really wasn't a war for the Commonwealth. It was kind of a battle, but I don't know.
There wasn't a war at all. There was a riot.
Yeah, more of a riot.
But yeah, I guess I kind of want to see something different from the Commonwealth.
I do too. To be honest,
yeah,
but I do like he said, it's its own thing, which it should be.
Absolutely.
You know? And don't mix CRM, because that's what a lot of people were commenting. Like, do you think CRM is the Commonwealth? And we've even mentioned it before in previous videos, because we've heard through, you know, the internet sphere that they're probably doing the Commonwealth story arc, but not really calling it the Commonwealth. It would be something, another version of it, which I'd be down for as well. You don't have to call it the Commonwealth, but I just do like that they want to take those changes, or take those things from the comic, make some slight changes, but not have it be, yeah, that's CRM too. No, because like Gimple said, it's staying out of it. He wants
CRM is staying out of it.
He wants CRM to be
CRM is staying out of it, then the world beyond is not the Commonwealth.
No.
Yeah.
Not Commonwealth.
So, which, you know, and it makes sense too, because if we're going to use the storyline of there's a lower class, there's a higher class, the lower class isn't allowed to do much, nor would kids be able to move or migrate from one community to the city of another community. Like, that wouldn't be allowed in the Commonwealth. So, I mean, not going to happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're excited. We got some good information. You know, I think Gimple has given some good insights onto this as far as Rick Grimes, CRM, the Commonwealth. So stay tuned for the final part 4, where we're going to be discussing more of the Walking Dead series and the universe plans for some more stories. So stay tuned, guys. Make sure you smash the like button. Let us know in the comments your thoughts of this part 3. And subscribe to the channel. Follow us at NocBro Nation on Facebook and Twitter. I am Joel.
I'm Josh.
We're NocBro Nation.
We're out.